Let's start. Hopefully some more people are joining us as we give the intro. So thank you very much for joining another Centaura webinar. So every 3 weeks we get together and try to discuss some very current topics. Today is gonna be a pretty exciting fireside chat. We're gonna be talking about how we use a lot of cutting edge AI internally. This is the first time that we're gonna be disclosing some of this to known clients and more in a public setting. And obviously, there is a lot of buzz around AI, but in Web3, there is really to introduce himself in a minute. Before we start, we always want to give an update on Centaura on the last few weeks. So a couple of things. So on over the weekend, obviously, pretty much everybody is aware of the big exploit that happened with the Resolve protocol that rippled into both in Morpho and Euler and other protocols and affected several curators in the space, as we have publicly communicated. Centaura had no exposure to Resolve ever, so it's not like we were not affected because of we or Fritz's team never approved the USR as an asset in any of our bots. They have run a very rigorous process for examining assets from a risk perspective and decided that it wasn't a fit at that point. So from that perspective, we didn't have any exposure. I think we were one of the few curators that didn't have an exposure, but also we had a lot of work to do monitoring the situation and monitoring other protocols that could have side effects from this. But all our clients' positions were safe. We communicated that accurately to clients, and then our research team published a very detailed report. Uh, then this was work that took place over the weekend. Um, in addition to that, some interesting news. You guys know we launched Kraken Earn a few weeks ago, and our first ball there crossed 110 million a few days ago, and it's growing pretty fast. And very soon we're gonna be announcing some new vaults that have uh, quite a quite a sizable forecast, let's say in terms of assets. And in the next time we meet, we're gonna have a new major product release that is scheduled for early April. So we're gonna start the quarter with a massive release on one of the biggest product release we ever done in terms of our DeFi strategies and risk management. So that's consuming the end of the quarter for us. Also, Farlight, the DeFi insurance protocol that we incubated at Centaura, opened the second cap, and it's about to get filled up hopefully in the next few hours. And the reception, particularly post Resolve exploit, the value proposition of insurance as a key primitive of DeFi has only become more and more relevant. So we think that products of Farlight definitely deserve to exist, and this is a good moment for them in the market. So we're really pushing that. I think those are probably the most relevant updates that I have. I don't know if my marketing team is going to give me a hard time that I missed something important. So with that, we can go to the topic today. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about AI, apply AI in DeFi. Differently from most companies in Web3, Centaura has a very strong AI DNA. I teach apply at Columbia, I've been in AI for 20 years. The part of the founding engineering team has a very deep background in AI, and we have been using traditional ML first, and then obviously more generative AI recently for years now. And one of the most interesting areas that we're applying that is in our research efforts. And when we decided to cover this topic, I thought of no better person to have the discussion with me than our Vice President of Research, Juan Pacer, who has led a lot of this initiative for his research team, and we're gonna be covering some of that. So Juan, I don't know, Juan has done a few of these webinars, but I don't know if you want to give a quick intro of yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus. So probably people know me from previous webinars, but Juan Pellicer, VP of Research at Centora, been pretty much on DeFi since 2021, deploying capital at scale on DeFi strategies, designing risk metrics, and well, pretty much since ChatGPT 3.5 in 2022 back then, I've been using heavily both personally and professionally. And yeah, super happy to share with everyone today how we have been applying some different models and different infra for our purposes.
Very cool. So the way we're going to structure this conversation is we're going to talk a little bit about how we see the space and apply AI. We're going to show you some things across the product, and then we can close it with some visions around about the future of how we think AI in DeFi could evolve. So when I think about the Centaura trajectory in machine learning and AI, we start with very traditional ML techniques. And when you look at our strategies, every strategy we put in production comes accompanied with a specific risk models that are fundamentally decision trees that evaluate different risk signals, whether it's a depegging scenario, whether it's a well exiting a market, whether it's a change of composition in a lending protocol, and based on that, try to forecast a specific risk profile, and makes a decision whether to exit a position or reduce leverage or things like that. And I believe that level of risk management has been fine-tuned over the last 4 years kept us safe during the 22, 23, that it was a very, very, very difficult incident in DeFi, and the amount of risk triggers and risk conditions that we experienced was very brutal. And then it came a time, but all that, we were probably the only company doing this, and probably still are, but AI was not a sexy thing, right? And then obviously came the ChatGPT moment, and the way that we think about Centaura is we believe firmly that every tech company is going to be an AI company at its core. And we started a very intense effort to reimagine every single workflow in the company, from commercial to content to operations, obviously to tech, using AI agents as a first class citizen. And that is easier to say, but it's very difficult to implement. And one of the areas in which this has been more impressive to me has been in research. So when we speak to customers, obviously we demo our platforms or track record, the strategies, we show the risk models, but they rarely get to see how we build this large platform that today is running billions of dollars in assets, and hundreds of strategies. And recently, in a meeting with a customer, we had somebody who asked us, how do you guys do this? And because we always talk, we use all these agentic workflows. And when we show them, he told us, like, why aren't you showing this to more customers? Like, this is crazy. And we have been doing that more and more recently. Obviously, we're very protective of some very strong IP that we have. But we have been doing that recently, and customers are blown away. Like, when the the pipeline that we have built from a strategy ideation to production is something that it just doesn't exist in any platform in the market today. And it was good before, but it has been augmented incredibly with AI recently. So Juan, do you want to double click on that and tell us in your team, how do you guys, how has that evolution been?
Yeah, totally, Jesus. So I think we are transitioning from how we have been using AI. I mean, as a whole, not as a Centora. There are still some companies that are stuck in this whole model of having a tool like ChatGPT or Claude, where they are prompting one message at a time and getting an output that is mostly text and is constrained by the limit of the response towards this concept of agentic AI, where basically the models have gotten so powerful that they can be left alone iterating over some idea, just giving it a goal or a plan, and being able to iterate constantly to fix things here and there and come up with an output that is way more rich. So finally, they have gotten this level of autonomy where it's not so efficient to be a member of a team that is just using their own Cloud or ChatGPT instance, but it's way better to have a single agent that can be used across a team. So we can think of an interface where it has preloaded different AI models that are very specialized for different tasks, that they all probably share the same knowledge base, and they can be run autonomously if we want to. So I think we are in this transition where we are going to see more and more teams start to build common tools internally to make the better use of them and get more insights.
And can we talk about your, let's say before we implemented this thing, how were you guys discovering the strategies? And let's go into what we're doing. Well, I can probably explain what we're doing now. We can show it.
Yeah, so strategy discovery on DeFi, there is nothing that is particularly standard. We have had several phases. Initially, people were just uh, uh, going to the different protocols front ends and just checking what was available or not. Then there was the era of yield aggregators where you had a larger set of strategies per package. And nowadays, still there is no standard, but pretty much everyone is checking here and there still yield aggregators or DeFi Llama yields. So there is a large amount of yields that are still not tracked, and people have a hard time to find them. So we tried the first iterations we tried with AI were through Grok. Grok is very powerful because it integrates a lot of the crypto chatter. So it was interesting to ask about, for example, incentive campaigns, and Grok was able to scrape all of the data of people speaking lately of incentive campaigns, even if they were small, and be able to find those opportunities. So little by little, we have been going through those phases and coming up with an internal tool that is helping massively on yield discovery, which we call the yield copilot, right?
So before we get there, so when we think about the mission of Centaura, one of our core pillars is to build the best yield machine in the market. So, and for that, we have once has a team, 7, 8 researchers that all they done is looking at strategies. And over the years, we built a pipeline from a strategy idea to evaluation to our AI team evaluating the strategy to the smart contract implementation to production, that it was very efficient. But when we started on this mission of modernizing the entire stack, with AI, one of the first areas that we attacked was how can we give all these researchers superpower, and then we observe a little bit how the research team work, and came up with this idea of essentially introducing an agentic flow into that. So I'll let Juan show the demo, but this is the way it works. So. Um, AI is very good at generating code. AI in general is good at what is called verifiable domains, in which you can generate something and you can verify the validation of it because and code has a large data sets in the market. and it's very verifiable. You can take a piece of code and validate if it works. So when we think about what we did was to model, created a pseudo language for that describe every strategy that we could conceptualize with primitives such as swapping, bridging, paying a loan, borrowing, and things like that. And then we trained so we built two agents. Now they're more. One that is very creative and scans, I don't know what is it, 4,000 pools and looks at combinations and things and suggests strategies with some criteria, and one that assesses risk and parameters. And the reason that we did this is we wanted to evolve to the two in parallel. We don't want one agent to be creative and one to have the restrictions. But also we want them to have that creative loop in between. This was inspired by a work that DeepMind did a couple of years last year, I think, with two systems, one called Alpha Proof and one called Alpha Geometry, that won silver medal in the International Math Olympiad. And they sort of evolved those systems into something called DeepSync. But at the time, they used an LLM to generate hypotheses of a math problem, and they use symbolic models that will tell you this is wrong or not, and the LLM will go back and generate a new idea and iterate on that. And the productivity gains of this has been insane. I think we went from researchers looking at 3, 4 strategies a week to 12 strategies a day. So it is like, so I want to show you how it works, and hopefully it might give you a glimpse of why we're so fast on coming up with new ideas for strategies.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus. I think it's approval to share screen. So to double down on one of the problems that this tool is solving is we had already for over 3 years a deterministic model um, that was already calculating, well, researching, discovering strategies on DeFi, but it was pretty much a non-AI model that requires support for each of the underlying protocols or assets or strategies that we were offering. So every time that we wanted to find new yields, we'll have to search them externally, and then we'll have to do an internal integration with the smart contracts of the underlying protocol. Moreover, if there were incentive campaigns through Merkle, it was even more complex because we had to double down on that integration. So yeah, the tool that I'm going to show is taking the approach of not having to integrate manually each of these protocols, but pretty much give a domain-specific language to an AI agent that can understand the primitives that we support as strategies. So this is how the tool is looking. You will see that it's very similar to any other chat models, ChatGPT or Claude. The difference is that it has a selector of different agents that we have been coming up with. So here you can see that we have a main strategy agent, which will be the one that will be searching for strategies. While we have a couple of other agents like this feedback agent that is very focused on the risk of the underlying strategies. I'm going to demo both, but nowadays we're iterating with other use cases. Like we have an analyst that is being able to understand the code base and the documentation of a DeFi protocol, and you can ask questions about how specific parts of the protocol works, and it will explain you without having to check manually the code or the documentation. But to show a little bit of a demo of how this works, it pretty much starts with a prompt where you will ask some inputs about what you are looking for. So usually we define the kind of assets that we want to deploy into. In this case, I just wrote to search stablecoin strategies that are yielding over 6% with capacity to deploy over 1 million. Meaning that if we deploy more than 1 million, the dilution of the yield is not going to go lower than 6%. So what happens after prompting with natural language, we can define even some constraints, like only look at certain chains or protocols. But what will happen is that the AI agent will launch a series of different tools that we have been providing it with. So things like querying the smart contracts of the underlying protocols, understanding the state of, for example, a lending protocol and getting how much is the return on lending in that protocol. Also text pools as well. Also queries token prices to calculate APYs. And it launches a series of queries that are both on-chain and off-chain to come up with a set of different strategies. So we can see here how it's been assuming this 1 million deployment and just filtering out strategies that are not above 6%. Um, and it's pretty much looking at things that probably we will not be looking at. So obvious things like yields on Aave on another blockchain or some Morpho Vault with very high TVL are things that we already control, but we want to go a little bit further and see things that we might be missing. So you will see here how it's recommending a series of strategies. The first one is lending USDC on a protocol called Neverland that is paying over 8%. So it's getting how much is supplied to that protocol already, which is over 55 million. It also outputs some risk profile. In this case, it's stating that it's a newer chain or protocol, but the strategy is pretty simple because yes, lending. So it has also the execution steps for more complex strategies that I will show. This is quite important, but it's able to also understand the APY and to calculate the dilution. So one of the agents that we have has code execution, so it can launch Python code on demand and do the exact calculation of how much could be the dilution of the APY. There is some debugging info as well for us. But yeah, you can see here another
Jefferson,
one.
what would you say, like, so you cannot one shot the answer to some a problem like this, right? You cannot tell Cloud, or give me an idea of this strategy and come on, like, why do you need this agentic flow? Why do you need the loop? And why do you need the multiple agents and the tools?
Yeah, this is something that anyone can try nowadays just to ask for strategies like this on any AI tool, and it's not going to be able to comprehend which is the current market state, how much is being paid, which is the risk profile of that protocol. So it's going to be bringing mostly outdated data or some thread that is picking up maybe on X about some yield opportunity that might not be relevant anymore, might have it diluted already. Um, and probably if you want to add complexity, like hey, saying how much you want to deploy is not going to be able to understand how much you're affecting the state of that pool or that market. So um, so yeah, is showing some other strategies like lending on Gearbox, also helping on a DEX pool on Hyperion, on Aptos. So it's picking up also newer blockchains that people might not be following as much. And I want to show also, I will show more strategies, but the second one I want to show, let me see. Yeah, so this is the second agent, which is called the feedback agent, where basically we share the output of the strategies with this agent, and it's able to come up with a risk assessment of each of these strategies. So this is just
And these
the
two interact with one give the strategy, the other criticize the strategy, and they do this loop until they agree on something.
Yeah, of course, afterwards we will go over it. We will do a deep dive into the protocol, the blockchain, the yield sustainability, and a bunch of other things. But as a first layer for some protocols that we might never heard about or that are newer chains, it's always super handy to have a first pass with this feedback agent. This is just the input that I shared, and here we can see some of the risk points that it brought. So it's talking about Monad. There are some strategies on Monad, how it's a quite a new chain. So there was some spoofing or scam activity that was reported, so it's mentioning to be aware of that. It's also talking about emissions, and they might be diluted heavily, or they might not sustain over time. It's also mentioning the bridging risk that there is on going to some of these chains like Monad, Stellar, or Aptos, which is important. And then it goes strategy by strategy, giving a risk profile and uh, mostly stating which are some of the key risks that one can find. So there are some interesting ones over here. When they are relying on incentives on incentive programs, is stating so to be aware that they might reduce at some point. It's also tracking the auditories that these protocols had. So it's already doing web searches and indexing all of those auditories and explaining if there was any high severity item that was found. It also tracks the asset risk, not only the protocol risk, but understanding that the Ethereum yield might be volatile depending on their backings. And yeah, overall is pretty good. But we have been iterating over this main agent, and we came up. Let me see. Yeah, it came up with we came up with a second model that is able to run code, Python code, directly and double check that some of the math is correct. Moreover, it's able to infer some strategies that are more complex. So it's going beyond what is lending and helping on dexes and bridging to come up with the strategies that you guys probably know that we run, like supervised lending or leverage looping. So you will see here on this agent B2 how is inferring some strategies that are looping Ethena on IB3 against USDT, and hence why it's quite important to assemble the steps correctly, because looping requires to borrow and lend several times. The APY's calculation are very accurate as well. It's picking up another one with USDE, which is cheap to borrow as well. Also on Plasma, it's possible to run this kind of strategies. It's finding also the Morpho loop, the Morpho Blue market that we are creating on Morpho with APYs over 6%. And yeah, some other things like setup USDT looping. And here there is, just to wrap it up, another run with the feedback agent where is very interesting, because what is taking is understanding the segregation of risk that we have when we deploy into DeFi, which is to understand that some risk might come from protocols, some other risk might come from assets, or some other set of risk might come from the underlying strategies, like looping strategies have liquidation risk. So first you will see that is doing mostly a check on IB3 and Morpho. Then on the assets, the underlying assets that were offered for the strategy, particularly Ethena and its rate volatility. It's also even plugging into their bug bounties to understand if those are in place. And those are more like general ones over the set of strategies, but then it has capabilities to go over each of the specific strategies to highlight which are the things that one have to be cautious about. It's interesting. It also infers things like borrow APR spikes. So USDT is very prone on IB3 to have these borrow rate spikes. So the agent was able to infer that via web search and be able to bring it up.
So,
Yeah.
um, so one thing that has been incredible for me to witness, I don't know if you can elaborate on this. So you have a team of some of the best sort of quantitative DeFi researchers in the market. Like these guys are some of the best at what they do, and they are very accustomed to understand protocols and the math and try to and discover strategies. And you show up with this, say, we're gonna have all these agents and that are going to be better at doing this, what we do. And initially, there was pushback, right? Like, oh, it's the tech is not there, like, and then seeing that transformation from being skeptical to now we don't do anything without, like, these agencies appear and we don't know what to do anymore. So how has that been?
Yeah, it's been massive, right? Because it's we knew how hard it was over these 3 years to come up with a deterministic model that was able to infer specifically how we affect the market when we assemble one of these complex strategies, and to be able to finally work on it and provide the understanding to the AI model to infer perfectly what we want to do. It's been incredible, right? It required a lot of work, not only in terms of like the launching the application, but in defining specifically for the model to understand the primitives that we support, how it affects to lend to deposit into a lending protocols, the impermanent loss that you suffer when you LP on a DEX, those kind of things, that kind of understanding. The LLMs had a general idea of it, but to specifically understand APY dilutions in a lending protocol is something that was not getting very, very well. So it was a very iterative process where we were tweaking and giving more understanding via prompts to the AI how these strategies were being assembled and disassembled, and what were the things that they needed to keep in mind for to check parameters and things like that. So after deploying the strategy, it also has capabilities to add feedback. So basically, we have a knowledge base of feedback where every time that we spot something that needs to be improved on, we add it to that file and is able on the next run to have that in consideration. So it can go from simple things like blacklisting some protocols or assets that we are not interested into deploying into, to some more complex things like interest rate models differences between Morpho or Aave, right? So yeah, it's still working in progress, and there are some things that we think that we can improve here and there, but so far it's been very, very useful to be able to stay on top of the market.
So let's talk about we tried to so one of the things that I think is highly differentiated for us, at least we try really hard, is to stay on top of AI research, new techniques, and really incorporate it into a workflow. And we try a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, and from time to time we land on good things like what you just showed. So one project that we have been working on for the last year is Farlight, and Farlight is for the ones that are not familiar, is a large-scale DeFi cover or insurance protocol that provides protection to different DeFi assets like bots or protocols or strategies or things like that. Like for instance, Centaur will be client number one, like we're gonna insure our billions in positions via Farlight. But Farlight is in the game of modeling and quantifying risk. And we didn't prepare anything for this webinar because we didn't have time, so I don't know how much we can show or not. But can we talk about how do we tackle risk modeling at that level first? And this new thing that we came up with a few days ago that you just blew everybody away, and it was how an AI model was able to do better modeling than ourselves. So
Yeah, yeah, totally. So the same risk framework that we have been using for quantitative strategies on DeFi over these years is what we are applying to Firelight. So all of that knowledge is what we are trying to put together to assess risk on DeFi for Firelight. So we came up with this knowledge of having a clear distinction between technical risk and economical risk. So by technical risk, we mean mostly something related to smart contract hacks, where there is a vulnerability on a Solidity code and a hacker can gain access to the funds on an underlying protocol or asset. That could be the technical vector, the risk vector. And then we have the economical one. So the canonical one will be events that are non-binary and can be somehow monitored and predicted. So we are talking about, particularly for lending protocols, Oracle price manipulations or bad debt events. So the risk radar that we launched years ago is particularly trying to monitor the economical risk that there is on these underlying protocols. So how we have been leveraging this for Firelight is that we came up with what we call the risk pyramid, where we are evaluating both of these vectors, technically and economically, um, at different layers. So one of the first layers is the blockchain, right? Uh, if you deploy on different blockchains, you might be exposed to some centralization risk in some cases. In other cases, particularly with Ethereum, gas spikes can make you to not be able to disassemble a strategy, and you might end up liquidated. So that's the first layer that we check. Then we move on to the protocol risk, right? When people talk about risk on DeFi, they are mostly referring to protocols. But it's been clear, moreover, in the last year or two that one doesn't need to only assess risk at the protocol level, but also the asset exposure that you might have on a market or a lending protocol might be exposed to a set of different assets, and those assets might have inherent risk as well. So we are evaluating blockchain risk, protocol risk, asset risk. And there is another layer that is newer with isolated lending that is related to curators, which is the market risk or bold risk, if we want to call it. And lastly, from the point of view of ensuring DeFi strategies, is also important the kind of a strategy that you are executing. It's not the same risk to LP on DEXs than to open a leverage loop on a lending protocol, right? So we are evaluating both technical and economical risk at each of those specific layers and coming up with an additive model that is evaluating different parameters for each of those items. So how this translates into is that it allows us to come up with a model that not only can ensure strategies, but it can ensure a whole vault composed of a different set of strategies that might be deploying on different blockchains, on different protocols, and have exposure to different assets with different underlying strategies. So it's super granular, super holistic, and yeah, we think that this is the only way to assess risk
So
as best
we
as
we
possible.
took we took these massive protocols and decomposed it into like 120, whatever it is, very granular factors and evaluated all sorts of risk vector proximity from hacks and all that, and trained a series of models that essentially could score based on that. And then a couple of weeks ago, you've read, I don't know if you read something I wrote, I don't know, but you approached me with this idea of using a super novel stuff that hadn't been tested. That is called Out of Research. And Out of Research is an open source framework that was released 2 weeks ago, literally, by a somewhat famous AI scientist, Andrei Karpathy, that he was early employee at OpenAI, went and built the autopilot Tesla, went back to OpenAI, and now is working on an education startup called Eureka Lab. So he contributes a lot to open source. And in traditional machine learning, there have been a school of called neural architecture search that is essentially using AI to create AIs to discover new architectures. It's never been very effective, but it's been in theory for a while. And this guy wrote a very small framework that allows an agent to propose an optimization to a machine learning model, run an experiment for 5 minutes on a single GPU. And if the experiment is successful, iterates on that. And if not, tries something else. So, and it runs a loop all the time. So it's an agentic version of a very old idea. And the result seems to be very good. So you came and said, I'm gonna try this. So what happened?
Okay, yeah. So I like to think of it like an optimization engine, right? So the original project of Carpathy was very, very focused on LLM training, which for our use case, which was some machine learning models, was not completely suitable. So there are some projects already that are incorporating this harness that Carpathy came up with, but doesn't require specifically um, a high-end GPU to train. So what we did, we already had in place two machine learning models that were being used to evaluate the economical aspects of the risk on Firelight. So these two machine learning models were trying to predict probability and severity of a loss in a lending protocol. This was heavily based on the risk radar data that we have available. So this is a corpus of data that is very large. It had over 1,000 different markets, particularly for lending protocols. And was interesting because the limitation for us to make this machine learning model better was mostly to have more time to run different parameters. By that, I mean maybe do some feature engineering, change another set of hyperparameters, change the training phases, longer or shorter. So we put to use this auto research framework, and basically nowadays it can be run an AI that will execute it automatically. So what it will happen is that it will propose a small change, can be a new hyperparameter, a tweak on the architecture. It will edit the code. It will run a short experiment, and if the target metric that you are measuring improves, it will maintain those parameters. If they don't improve, they will just discard it. So we did a couple of runs, and the third run is true that it didn't improve much, but the first two runs improved the model about 50% on most of the scoring metrics that we were checking. So it was particularly interesting because it was able to infer that some of the things that were changed in the first run worth it to keep changing those parameters in that direction and try again to see if it was improving the scoring. So yeah, what ended up happening is that we got better scorings, and now we have these two machine learning models that are scoring particularly good and are very predictive uh, of the probability and severity of having a bad debt event on a DeFi lending protocol.
Okay, let's discuss a couple of topics before we go to questions. One is like as I said, we're trying to embrace everything that is new in AI, at least evaluate it. One of the things that we are looking at that has caused a lot of noise recently has been OpenCloud and this personal agent sort of possibilities. How are you thinking about that in the context of research?
So in the context of research, I have to be honest that I have not tried yet, and it's mostly related to data issues like giving access fully to personal data. For personal things, I'm still a little bit reluctant, even though it's true that nowadays it can be run with local models if you have a consumer GPU. But I think the switch is going to be less reactive, right? We are not going to go to an LLM to ask about something, but we are going to have an active coworker, let's say, that is going to be able to prompt you and understand what you are working on and be able to help you with some task. So I think that's where it's going to go. There are a lot of security concerns about prompt injection and other things, but to be honest, more than the security points, I think the limitation right now are coming from other side, and it's mostly trying to have integrated like a knowledge base. And by this, what I mean is that nowadays we are working with data that is scattered all around the place, like internal company documents, meeting recordings, message transcriptions from Slack. There is no a single way to query all of that into a single AI model. And I think the open cloud route could be a very interesting approach as long as those integrations are solid. For example, I know that Cloud has some of these integrations with Google Drive, with the Slack, and I've been trying several of them, and I think that still they are lacking a lot to have a good integration. So I think that the a full knowledge base integration will help. Also, as you saw on the demo, uh, online search tooling has been improving a lot. Initially, you were getting mostly news from Google search. Nowadays, there are specialized search engines like Exa that is not just matching by keywords, but has a deeper understanding. So I think that that will help a lot as well to make these agents more capable. And well, there is a huge switch to provide content that can be parsed by AI agents. Particularly on DeFi, we have seen how many DeFi protocols and common APIs like CoinGecko or DeFi Llama have APIs specification that can be ingested directly by an agent. Same for documentation of some of the major DeFi protocols. So I think we're moving towards a future where these agents will be clever, they will be able to help more and won't be as reactive as they are right now, where you have to query them and provide all of the context needed to perform the task successfully.
Cool. So we have a lot of questions, and I want to make sure we don't go past the hour. So just to close out this topic, we spent a lot of time sort of trying to imagine how DeFi is gonna look in a world of AI. Like AI is really changing every software industry from databases to infrastructure to cloud to tools. Somehow DeFi is still running by very archaic code with a smart contract and things like that. But we think that's going to change, right? Like we have written essays and papers about how DeFi can become intelligent and things like that. But one of the initiatives that we're gonna start doing is we're gonna start pushing some in some areas that we have more influence, and one of those is bulk curation. Like I think, particularly after the events of this weekend, I think bulk curation ultimately should be run by AI agents, right? Like it's not, and we have done a tremendous monumental amount of work on this. So as a matter of fact, in the spirit of being more transparent, the next webinar that we're gonna do is bulk curation with AI. We're gonna go into Morpho, Euler, Camino, these protocols and the type of things that you can do with AI. So it's gonna be super deep. You're gonna find the link on the chat. So please go ahead and register. It's gonna be in 3 weeks, so it's gonna be a lot of fun. And with that, let's go to a bunch of questions that we have here. So in no particular order. I think Shreya said that Nemo Cloud solves some of the security concerns you mentioned around Open Cloud. Nemo Cloud is a version of Open Cloud that was released by NVIDIA last week at GTC that essentially has all these guardrails around the engine. We haven't tried it yeah, but NVIDIA open sourced the whole thing. And they actually, as part of the story goes, I think when Nemo Cloud was released, Jensen Huang actually sent security researchers to work with the Nemo Cloud team to help them with security. So they seem to be very, very involved on this. Um, Afsar said, asked if we have many liquidity pool AMM strategies. We use AMMs all the time, so in all sorts of strategies for different things. So every strategy that we have that needs liquidity to exit or untangle a trade needs to use AMMs. Janus asked, what time horizon are the strategies? Anything applicable to a year? No, no chance in DeFi. Like what time horizons do we typically look at?
Yeah, it's really dependent, right? It depends on the type of strategies. Most of them you cannot have for certain that the APY is going to stay the same about a year. It really depends where the yield is coming from, right? In some cases, some protocols have maintained their yield higher than others with less volatility. So it really requires an understanding of where the yield is coming from. But for example, incentive programs might be more short-lived for some chains, for there might be a little bit longer. But yeah, maybe we are looking more at months rather than a year.
Yeah, I love this question. Iyasu asks, is there an agent that could execute the strategy maybe to help others validate the assumption? Absolutely. So, and this is, oh, again, remember, this webinar is about research. We haven't talked about engineering. We use AI, which is all over the place. But the way you do that, you take the code for a thing, and there is an agent that forks a chain, executes a code, and validates the results and go back. And hopefully, we'll have all this fully agentic very soon, but this is definitely possible with today's technology. Um, Shreyas also asked, really impressive, da, 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 da. Which models are we using on this? And do you have humans in the loop? Yeah, of course, our research team, as we show you, it validates everything that we do. We use all sorts of models. So the tool set that you saw can pick difference. We obviously think the commercial models, Gemini, Claude, and OpenAI are a little bit ahead, but we're looking at open source, particularly the Chinese models, where we need to specialize and post-train models for very specific needs. I think that's the same question Anastasia has. Which AI models do we use? And then Adam, who is always good to see in the Adam Bilko, is asking how long Centaura has been working on AI ML models. This is seems about 4 years on different dimensions. And how big is the acceleration impact from cloud or later GPT models on risk management and yield sourcing capabilities? I think I'll say a lot of the stuff that we show you here, it wouldn't have been possible before. So it's really a byproduct of these frontier models. And I think something magical happened in December with Opus 4.5. I think Cloud and now Codex really show that, this type of fully autonomous agents are possible, right? Like that, the landscape has completely changed in the last few months, and we're in it, so we see it and we're able to embrace it rapidly. But many things are possible now that were not possible as late as December last year. More questions. Ignacio asks, are you open to integrating external DeFi AI tech? What's the best way to reach out? Yeah, of course. Reach out, drop me a note at jr@centauro.com. Happy to take a look. SD as bulk curation with AI, whatever. It's about the ADM token. We're gonna do bulk curation with AI among other things. We're doing it internally. We're gonna be more public about it. Um, and then, do you think of productizing your AI tech, Anastasia? We don't know. We need to see how. So far, it's all internal for productivity gains, but hopefully, we give you a view why we move so fast. Could be if DeFi grows a multiple, and considering the expansion that we're going through, a lot of this can become products potentially. I think every software in the world is going to become agentic. So, um, and then I think I cover pretty much everything. Are you using Morpho bots? Yes, Rich, and thank you for joining. We're using Morpho, Euler, Camino, and many other bots. We're protocol agnostic. We work with Aave, with all the bot providers. So as long as they can pass our risk analysis. I think that's all for today. We've really went long on this one. So thank you very much for joining, and I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks all.